So I've always been tempted to begin every meeting and every presentation and every article with this statement. Friendly reminder, we are all going to die. Not right now, hopefully. No plans for that. But why? It helps level set the importance or lack thereof of whatever it is that we are doing and adds with it the context and urgency that we need to act. But with artificial intelligence exploding into use, that reminder of our mortality comes with a new context and urgency. The headlines are alarming, and even if you take care to avoid the news, like I have been doing sometimes, the doom may be creeping into your inbox, as it has mine. Down here, 2 back-to-back emails, one about extinction, one about a survival kit. Whew. And yet, death is natural. All living systems go through cycles of birth and death. Whether it's the strawberries rotting in your refrigerator or bigger living systems like forests or oceans, when the context shifts over time, everything naturally degrades if it's not resilient and adaptable to the environment that exists. This also goes for living systems that humans comprise, organizations, companies, industries, sectors. Ascent, descent, birth, death, round and round the cycles go. So a helpful way to visualize this is something I've been turning to time and time again. It's called 2 loops. And here's a more detailed look. So there are always 2 loops going on at once. One that is descending into obsolescence and one that is emerging into dominance. And this is from Margaret Wheatley and Deborah Fries that describes this in their white paper about emergence and social change. So for journalism, the signs are obvious and grim for what was once the dominant and stable form of journalism. The attacks are obviously coming from all angles: cultural, political, technological, economic, and personal. And combined, this toxic stew serves to poison the trust in the institution of journalism and in the newsrooms that remain. So it's hard to come back from that. And frankly, I don't know if we can. If journalism as we have known it is clearly descending into some kind of hospice mode right now, then what if we accept that and we just give up trying to save it? As a recently published roadmap for local news provocatively asks, what and could we spend our energy and time on instead if we shouldn't focus on saving journalism? But first, though, it is only proper to take a moment to grieve. And it's un-American to spend more than a moment to grieve. So, moving right along. As we now reflect on the loss of journalism, it may be useful to revisit, what was it for in the first place anyway? The answers often include things like this: bearing witness, holding the powerful to account, providing context, helping people understand what's at stake. Reasonable people can all agree that these are some of the things it can do. But in reality, those idealized purposes of journalism never really manifested consistently, or for many, whether nationally or locally. For so many populations, it never fulfilled these promises or served the purposes. Still, and despite the rapidly changing context that we live in, there remains a need for someone somewhere to serve those purposes, to provide what journalism at its best and its most basic could do. We know the decline in quality information that used to come from newsrooms leads to myriad problems for communities and for democracy. I'm really excited to hear Mariano talk about that next. So what could rise up in its place if it is dead or almost there? The aforementioned Roadmap for Local News provides another way to name and frame it. They call it civic media. The report states that civic media seeks not simply to inform or entertain, but to equip people with the information they need to make the places they live better. And they call that civic information, which is high quality, verifiable information that enables people to respond to collective needs by enhancing local coordination, problem solving, systems of public accountability, and connectedness. Okay, cool. That sounds good to me. But who, if not journalists, will be producing civic information? Well, this is where the imagination and experimentation is required. Currently, there are more local librarians than local newspaper reporters. And libraries enjoy much higher levels of public trust than news, so that's a start. Could libraries and newsrooms collaborate? I hope so. We have actually started doing that at Hearken with some of our partners. So, there's a whole burgeoning network and community of practice that is taking the principles of what traditional journalism aimed to do and doing it differently, and oftentimes, frankly, more effectively. Take El Migrante from the Listening Post Collective. They fill the information void for migrants arriving at the US-Mexico border through disseminating a printed weekly news bulletin and distributing it to shelters and resource organizations. They also have a WhatsApp group for migrants answering questions and a podcast. And there's Outlier Media in Detroit, which uses SMS to essentially create what is a help desk for local residents. Through texting, they provide critically important information about basic needs like housing and utilities, and they even let people connect to reporters directly to report and answer their questions. They treat civic information as a necessity, not a luxury. El Timpano in Oakland is going beyond typical reporting. They've developed partnerships and services with local public health department, policy institutions, libraries, health clinics, even local bike networks to create and disseminate useful information for Latino immigrants. Across the country, the Documenters Network, which started here in Chicago from City Bureau, is popping up in cities, enlisting the skills and time of local residents to do what used to be acts of journalism, attending and reporting on local government meetings. And artists are even getting in on acts of journalism. For Freedom News is an artist-led reimagining of television news. They're bringing news to museums and art fairs, taking formats of live installation, performance, and conversation, and transmitting civic information through active participation. So in short, here's a growing list of who can and already is creating civic information outside of paid reporters. We have artists, poets, policymakers, librarians, students, local residents, really everybody can and already is doing this to some degree. So while civic media may be the name for what we call this emergent system that has started to replace traditional journalism in more and more spaces, this budding movement obviously faces a new formidable consideration: artificial intelligence. And we know investment is already pouring into the field in every industry to capitalize and create on efficiencies, and for institutions, and not just the ones that are struggling. Eric Gordon and Gabriel Mugar have a stark and helpful warning for this juncture that we're in right now in their book, Meaningful Inefficiencies: Civic Design in an Age of Digital Expediency. They write, efficiency, in the sense of charting a path to a goal with the least amount of friction, can be at odds with the goal of building trust in the institutions that mediate public life. In general, public-serving organizations seek a balance between transactional and relational models of getting things done. However, the promise of new technologies and the rush to implementation is creating lopsidedness as new digital tools compel people toward the transactional, and as publics grow increasingly distrustful of the role of civic institutions broadly, there is now more than ever a need to achieve balance. So in other words, AI could be seen as another threat to the kind of trusted relationships that civic media can create. That is, if we don't put equal investment and focus on the relational work as we do with the transactional tech. So what would it look like to invest our time, our money, and our energy equally into the complement of AI? Something me and my friend Mata Zepeda have taken to calling AE, actual experience. Thank you. You can use it. Actual experience is what we're doing right now. It's the human, three-dimensional, beating heart, sweaty side of life. Here, defining terms is actually useful. Actual is existing in fact, typically as contrasted with what was intended, expected, or believed. Experience is practical contact with and observations of facts and events. So developing some kind of automated AI news service is not going to push the needle on growing trust in the media. If anything, it's going to add to the backsliding. But what has been proven to generate an increased trust in the information that we journalists produce is face-to-face interactions with people, of actually having relationships. These can be activities like, just building relationships without a deadline or without a story, tabling at local news events, holding community forums, actually being part of the community, doing listening groups, advisory councils, partnering, co-creating, audience engagement, acts of micro-solidarity. These are all things that will preserve trust in our institutions if we decide to invest in them. So, this is a gross generalization of how newsrooms are staffed, but looking at the current jobs of most newsrooms, we know most outlets are still under-indexing and staffing the jobs that prioritize engagement, like events and like engaged journalism. But in the not too distant future, that could all change. Yes, AI might be coming, as we've heard, for many of the jobs that journalists used to do, but perhaps the balance of surviving newsrooms will look something like this. in which technical, transactional, and AI-related jobs create a lot of efficiencies and drop the need for as many people gathering and editing civic information. And perhaps there will be even more investment into relational roles that help ensure information produced is used, it's trusted, and it is informed by the people it is trying to serve. A girl can dream, right? And an expert can confirm this dream should become a reality. UW media professor of journalism, Sue Robinson, just published her new book. You should all pick it up. How Journalists Engage, a theory of trust-building identities and care. In it, she names the new roles and skill sets that those working in journalism need to invest in so that information can be used and trusted. They include things like relationship builder, community collaborator, community conversation facilitator, and professional industry networker. But these roles in the trust-building human actual experience and dialogical side of civic information creation and sharing cannot happen without investment. So I'm not arguing that no money should be going toward transactional technology and capabilities like all the things listed here, which have been around 70 years in the making. What I am arguing is that we have a 521 million-year-old technology called the human brain, which needs equal amounts of investment so it can optimize for things like care, compassion, deep listening, fully embodied information gathering, co-creation, and dissemination. These are things we're all capable of, but we don't have the psychological, interpersonal skills, incentives, and support to do consistently, especially in our newsrooms. So we humans still have a competitive advantage when it comes to one dimension against AI, that is care. As I wrote last year, AI couldn't care less. It cannot intrinsically care. So journalists or those doing acts of journalism need to make up for what's lost and care more. I created this handy little bingo card with Monica Guzman detailing acts of care you can still do today for free while doing acts of journalism. There are communities of practice and gatherings cropping up to focus on this dimension of the work. Nab that QR code now if you'd like to express your interest in being part of it. We will be getting back to you with opportunities. I'll share this on Twitter. So as you may be investing time, money, energy, doing hackathons into exploring what AI can do, I challenge you to ask yourself, how might you combine your own personal investment in artificial intelligence and AE actual experience? If the warnings of the experts in AI are accurate, and we do risk extinction-level events, perhaps one safeguard to save humanity is by saving our own humanity. Thank you very much.